Any Sikh or Singh warrior seen anywhere should be killed immediately. Shoot on sight orders were issued. Headhunters, warriors for hire from across the land were brought into Punjab to exterminate the Sikh populace. Lakhpat Rai stood on a stage and yelled out in arrogance that from this day forth no one shall say the name of the Guru. Doing so will incur the death penalty. After having your tongue cut out of your mouth, that the stomach of the person who utters the word Guru would be pierced with spears and sharp daggers. No one shall ever utter the word Guru. As his forces went through the jungles and battlegrounds, finding any dead bodies of Singhs who were shaheed on the battleground, chopping off their heads and decorating the city of Lahore with the decapitated heads of the Khalsa warriors. Bhai Rattan Singh Ji estimates that over 40,000 Singhs and Sikh were shaheed during the CHHOTA GHALLUGHARA. However, these were no definite numbers, but many believe the numbers to be much greater. In 1746, the pages of Sikh history were once again soaked in blood, as it was in this year in which the CHHOTA GHALLUGHARA took place. Tens and thousands of Sikh men, women and children were butchered and massacred. This was one of the most unforgettable and tragic events in our history. And in this podcast, we shall be paying homage to these valiant Shaheed Singhs and Singhniya, and taking just a brief glimpse into the extreme hardships they endured and what happened during those dark days of genocide. The CHHOTA GHALLUGHARA took place in 1746, as mentioned. And in the year before, in 1745, Yahya Khan, the son of the wicked tyrant Zakaria Khan, takes governorship of Lahore. Now this was already very difficult and volatile time for the Khalsa, as they were being mercilessly persecuted by the Mughals, and many Sikh had previously been killed and made shaheed. And remember, it was Zakaria Khan, Yahya Khan's father, who created a graded scale of rewards for the killing, capturing, murder and destruction of the Khalsa Singhs. A blanket, a shawl was rewarded for the cutting of a Gursikh's hair. 10 rupees for information about the whereabouts of a Singh, 50 rupees for a captured live Sikh, and 80 rupees for a Sikh scalp or decapitated head of a Singh. With this, the plunder of Sikh homes was made lawful. Giving shelter to Singhs or withholding information about their movements was made a capital offence worthy of the death penalty. And at this time, the Sikh were fighting for their faith. To be able to preserve their dharam and practice their faith freely was their dream. The Khalsa warrior lived as outlaws. And during this time, inadequate collections of revenue had further infuriated the Hukumat, the Mughal ruling authorities in Punjab, which included Lahore. They blamed the Khalsa for this and decided to kill them in an even more organised and systematic manner. Even more than before, the Khalsa Singhs now had a price on their head. New orders were issued that stated all Sikh are now barred entry to their holy shrine, Sri Harmandir Sahib Darbar Sahib. Any and all predominant Sikh should be arrested and killed immediately. Any Sikh or Singh warrior seen anywhere should be killed immediately. Shoot on sight orders were issued. Headhunters, paid mercenaries and warriors for hire from across the land were brought into Punjab to exterminate the Sikh populace. To further implement these fanatic policies, the immoral and evil Lakhpat Rai was brought in, and he took up the role as Revenue Finance Minister of Lahore. And together with Yahya Khan, Lakhpat Rai had his heart set on the total destruction and slaughtering of the Sikh Panth. Once again, they wanted the streets to run red in the blood of the Sikh. So in late 1745, under the governorship of Yahya Khan, the Hukumat was trying to kill and exterminate all Sikh, especially the Jathe of Nihang Singh warriors that existed. Even if they moved around very peacefully, they were to be killed. And under these dire circumstances, the Jathe of Nihang Singhs, the Khalsa warriors who were fighting back against this evil tyranny and oppression, resorted to take shelter in forests and jungles, as well as mountainous areas and swampy marshlands on the banks of rivers. These Jathe lived in such places in extreme difficulty in punishingly harsh environments. taking shelter in the shacks and in the dens of jaguars and leopards, as well as the caves of bears and other animals. Some resting camouflaged, hidden in long reeds and marshy greens. Others took over the lairs of wolves, constantly battling the harsh environment as well as the wild beasts and animals who inhabited these areas, hiding in the bushes and overgrowth growing on the banks of rivers. Some Singhs lived on the islands in the middle of rivers surrounded by water on all sides. The Mughal soldiers were continuously trying to locate these Khalsa in the hideouts, killing anyone in them, shooting the Singhs on sight, showering bullets upon them, smoking them out of dens, setting fire to such places. And so to escape these attacks, the Singhs, hiding and living in the marshlands and on the riverbanks, would dive into the river, diving to escape the Mughals, and as soon as they came up for air, the Mughal soldiers would rain bullets and arrows upon them. So taking their heads out of water to breathe, and then again the Singhs would dive deep in the water to escape from the bullets, swimming away and letting the current take them downstream. The plight of the Singhs at this time was beyond imagination and description. And under such horrid circumstances, there was nowhere for the Singhs to go. When Jathi of Singhs met each other, they would discuss what they should do or what they can do. Some suggested spreading thin and splitting up even more. Others suggested leaving the area altogether. But even then, where could they go when they are being hunted everywhere across the land and everybody is out to get them? The Khalsa warriors decided to come together and fight back this evil tyranny. This is our only way. And they did this through the use of guerrilla warfare tactics. The Khalsa warriors started invading the encampments of Mughal troops, taking the fight to them, going into the lion's den, retaliating and attacking the Mughal forces where they thought they were most safe. The Khalsa would go in and decimate the enemy at these places, hacking them to bits, snatching weapons, horses and supplies. When the enemy seemed to gather and get their wits about them, the Singhs would leave and go into their hideouts. And just when they thought it was over, another Jathi of Cobra Nihang Singh warriors, Bhujangis, would attack again and invade the Mughal encampments, doing this under the cover of darkness or attacking their enemies under the midday sun, a time which for others was a time of siesta and relaxation, when the enemy would retreat to their tents for shade, seeking a break from the blazing hot sun and Indian heat. That's when the Singhs would attack. And at night the Singhs would steal cattle and tie torches to their horns, so that from a distance it looked like two torchbearers approaching. They would do this with many cattle in the dark and at night and approach the Mughal camps. The Mughals, seeing this, thought there were many warriors approaching and would gather their forces to go out to meet them. And as they did, the Singhs would enter their camp from the other side, attacking the evil warlords, hacking off limbs, stealing weapons and supplies, taking horses and even poisoning the Mughal food supplies, taking revenge for the killing of many innocent Sikh civilians. Many Singhs at this time lived on horseback, even sleeping in the saddle, forever in a state of readiness, always ready to defend and fight back, always ready to come to the aid of the weak and downtrodden. This is what it means, and this is what it meant to be Tyar Pur Tyar, forever ready. Because the Singhs were always roaming on horseback, constantly moving from one place to another, being Chakravarti, the Mughals found it impossible to keep track of their numbers or pinpoint the location where they are. And they would overestimate the number of the Singhs because they thought it was impossible for such a small group of Singhs to be in so many places and constantly be fighting back and harassing the Mughal forces. The Khalsa were especially active at night. This is the time when they would avenge the oppression taking place and kill many wicked Mughal forces. During the day, when the Mughals got together to attack the Singhs would tactically retreat into the jungles and marshlands. The Turk and the Mughals were scared to enter these marshlands, jungles and forests. If they would enter, the Singhs would rally together and kill them. The Singhs would come out of the marshlands when it was safe and convenient for them to do so. In this way, they devastated the Mughal encampments on all sides from Lahore, Kasur and Delhi. The Singhs plundered the roads to Delhi and Lahore, robbing and looting passing Mughal, Turk and Pathan forces. With the use of guerrilla warfare tactics, the legend of the Khalsa warriors grew, and soon the Mughals were afraid to enter certain areas, certain paths or routes through forests and jungles out of fear of the Khalsa Singhs. And this is how the Singhs managed to create a big commotion and passed some of this difficult time, surviving on plunder while protecting the Panth and taking vengeance for the many atrocities committed by these tyrant Mughals. The Mughal forces would feel enraged on seeing the Nihang Singhs, especially on horseback, and on seeing huge army forces the Singhs ran. At other times they chose to engage. The Singhs would attack, then escape, fight and then turn away, then advance again, hiding and attacking. This is the way the Singhs fought. This is the practice of Dhai Phat Rai, 2.5 strikes. How else could so few deal with such large numbers and organised armies? The Singhs fought back on their own terms, fighting only when and where suited them. The Singhs stalked and killed the Mughals like hungry leopards and tigers. The attitude of the Akali Nihang warriors was do or die, always. The Turk and Mughal soldiers were fed, well fed and looked after. Their armies were made up of paid soldiers or hired warriors and mercenaries who aimed to live through the battles and skirmishes. And because of this, most Mughal soldiers were reluctant to face the Akali Nihang Singh warriors, as they knew if they faced them and they fought with them, these Singhs had a whole different mentality, do or die, fighting for survival, fighting for dharam, for faith, to the last drop of blood and to the last breath. The Singhs, in comparison, had no access to stores, no access to farms, grains, crops, flour or food. The Singhs knew not the taste of salt nor clarified butter. A warm meal and a good night's sleep was rare for them. Many of the Singhs lacked clothing and went around bare-chested. They lacked gunpowder and lead, and if they got sick, they died. There was no access to medical, no access to bandages or care. They only lived on the hope of the Guru's word. This was the only treasure they had, and this was the only treasure they needed. Many a time, the Singhs were unable to do sanskar and cremate the bodies of their fellow warrior brothers. So they would commit the Shaheed Singh's bodies to the water and rivers, doing jal parva of the bodies. And in spite of the hardest of times, the Singhs knew that Guruji was with them, and day by day, every day and every night they got stronger and more brave. Pain and suffering, warfare, fighting, death and fatigue. This is all they knew, and they counted them all as nothing. And it was during these dark and difficult times in which the Akali Nihang Singh brothers developed their Sikh bravado language of Gar Gaj Bole, Nihang Bole, words that thunder, words that inspire, and words that ridicule the enemy. These Bole transformed the Khalsa mannerisms completely. Although still internally humble, these hard times had brought out a more fierce and aggressive demeanour to terrify their enemies. The Akali Nihangs had now become the physical manifestation of the Khalsa warrior spirit Biras. This was an arrogance but pride and full confidence in their mission to obtain sovereignty and one day be able to live free. In early 1746, a Jatha of Akali Nihang Singh warriors had been hard-pressed and driven out of the Lahore area by bloodthirsty imperial forces of the Mughals. Slowly, the Singhs reached the area of Ahmedabad, now in Gurjanwal, Pakistan, about 55 kilometres from Lahore on the western side of the River Ravi. And this area was in the estate of Jaspat Rai, an experienced military commander and brother of the wretched tyrant Lakhpat Rai. This Jatha of Singhs that reached here was led by Jathadar Jaspat Singh Ji Ahluwalia and Bhai Sukha Singh Ji Maro Kambi. It was this Bhai Sukha Singh whom, along with Bhai Madab Singh, chopped off the head of Masarangar for disrespecting Sri Darbar Sahib. This Jatha of Nihang Singhs contained many battle-hardened veteran warriors, the toughest and roughest around. And while in Ahmedabad, they halted at the sacred shrine of the Gurdwara Rori Sahib, which was 2 kilometres southeast of the city. Gurdwara Rori Sahib is that sacred Gurukar where Sri Guru Nanak Dev Ji stayed with Bhai Lalo. Here Guruji sat on a hard bed of small stones, rodiyan, and did an immense amount of bhakti meditation. This is referenced in Bhai Gurdas Chand the Avara, the Janam Sakya and Nanak Prakash. And it was here in 1521 where Guru Nanak Dev Ji was arrested by the armies of the Emperor Babur. And this area, as mentioned, was under the land grant of Jaspat Rai, the brother of Lakhpat Rai. Now Jaspat Rai was a rich man, and he kept a large army with him at all times, whom were well trained and always heavily armed. Jaspat Rai was evil-hearted. He used to oppress the people of this area. He would extract money from them through torture, and he would take what he wanted when he wanted. Anything and anyone was his, and he took them by force. The village heads of this area had been imprisoned, beaten, and at times killed if they failed to meet the demands of Jaspat Rai. The people here, due to Jaspat Rai's high taxes and extortion, lived in great garibi poverty. And on hearing the news of the arrival of the Khalsa Singhs, many of these poor Kisans rushed out to join them, fleeing their homes, taking what little they had. Reaching Rori Sahib, they greeted the Singhs with great love and affection. There was a great joy like the reunion of old friends. The Khalsa Singhs themselves had not eaten at this point for many, many days. They had just left the marshlands, which they had occupied for many months. And here they had no access to grain, or rice, or flour, salt, or ghee. There was no food, no access to cooking facilities, no access to medicine. They could not light fires because the lighting of fires would give away their location in the jungles and hideouts. Due to some of the Singhs starving and some who were injured and in need of medical care, the Khalsa decided to stop here at Rori Sahib for a short time. And they decided they would prepare langar here and have a hot meal, the first in many months, and at the same time they could get medical care and supplies. Some of the Kisans went out to get supplies from stores and from areas and from other people they knew, and with them they took a letter for Jaspat Rai. The letter read out, "Jaspat Rai, you are a Hindu and you are here in these lands in a position of power. Understand it is because of the Guru that you are here. And it is because of the Guru's blessing that anyone is anything in this world. And you are here because of that. Realize this. We are here. We don't want any conflict or enmity here. Our war is with the Turk and with the Mughals, not with you. We are only passing through this land and want to buy some provisions for our langar and necessities. Having starved for many days, we will prepare and partake in langar, and then we will move on. The Singhs will cause you no harm. In fact, if anything, while we are here, we will only defend this land, you and the people that live here. Shortly we will leave, passing on and entering into another's domain." Receiving this message, the egotistical Jaspat Rai was furious, and through the poor Jat Kisan, he sent a message back to the Singhs, and Jaspat Rai replied, writing, "Abandoning your jungle swamps and marshlands, you have come out. You think this was of your free will? You are wrong. In fact, it was the messengers of death whom have brought you here, doing so I can kill you. You think I will give you time to cook and eat? I will have your hair, your sacred gears cut and intertwined and made into ropes to draw water from wells for my Mughal brothers to drink. I will shave your heads and have water from my hukke poured upon you. You come here looking for provisions, but here you have only found death and destruction and troubles. When my brother finds out, he will have you arrested and he will capture you and kill you like they did your Money Singh. and throwing you before the great governor, you will be killed in the same way as your Mani Singh was killed, cutting you limb by limb. And when the Singhs heard this message, they reacted as if stung by a scorpion. These words had reminded them of the shahidi of their dear beloved brother Bhai Mani Singh Ji. And on hearing the disrespect to their case and to their beloved shaheed brother, the Singhs said, "Let that be avenged." The Singhs resolved now they must kill Jaspat Rai due to the words that he wrote in the letter, due to the disrespect which had come out of his mouth. This was the only option now. So doing an ardas and bowing their heads at the house of Guru Nanak Dev Ji, the Akali Nihang Singh Khalsa warriors set off. The egotistical drunk idiot Jaspat Rai with his large military force had set off towards Rori Sahib himself. Heavily armed and in an excessive number, they planned on a massacre, a bloodbath. They had planned on surrounding the Khalsa Singh's location and attacking them. But it was the Singhs who attacked him and his forces first, tracking them down and launching an attack of their own. The infuriated Akali Nihang warriors furiously attacked the armed forces of Jaspat Rai, charging them down and pouncing upon them like starving jungle cats. A great fight commenced, but this was not the bloodbath that Jaspat Rai had planned on. In fact, it was his forces that were being hacked apart and chopped up. A great Nihang Singh warrior by the name of Bhai Nabahu Singh, immediately on seeing Jaspat Rai, charged towards him. Manoeuvring, he jumped up onto the war elephant on which Jaspat Rai was present, and with great speed and agility, displaying superior martial skill in Shastra Vidya, with one stroke of his talwar sword, he chopped off the head of Jaspat Rai, jatkaing the egotistical idiot with a swift blow of his shastra. With the other hand, he snatched the many thick gold chains off the headless body of Jaspat Rai, kicking the decapitated head and pushing the decapitated body off the elephant onto the ground. The Singhs, in great Biras warrior spirit, massacred and butchered the forces of the wicked Jaspat Rai, hacking apart whomever came forward in this fight and in this field of battle, snatching swords, jewellery and arms off the bodies of their enemies. The rest of the enemy forces ran from the battlefield like cowards to save their own lives. Screaming and crying, they sprinted away from the Khalsa Singhs as if a great tsunami wave was approaching. The Singhs chased them and chopped down whoever they could get hold of. They turned and they kicked around the decapitated head of Jaspat Rai like a soccer ball, taking it with them as they left. Through this battle, the Singhs had gained much wealth and were relieved of their abject poverty. So the Singhs went on to take the town of Ahmedabad and ransacked it thoroughly, sending money and supplies back to the lands where the poor Kisans were from, and from whom much had been taken, relieving the poverty in that area, also robbing from the rich to give to the poor. The Singhs were now able to restock up on provisions and get medical care. The appearance of the Singhs changed overnight, as now they looked like kings with expensive new shawls and clothes. Along with newly required weapons and horses, they were no longer recognizable as the starving warriors who lived in jungle swamps and marshlands. The Khalsa Singhs now set up large langars to feed the poor and needy, as if they were now kings and they were feeding everyone a hot meal and having one themselves, as they had not eaten in many months. The Singhs of Watery Dhal, present at this point, numbered at roughly around 2,000 to 2,500 warriors. And during this time, an Akhand Path Sahib was conducted at Gurdwara Rori Sahib, and after the Bhog, an Amrit Sanchar was performed, and many new recruits joined the Dal, joining the Khalsa Panth, ready to take up arms and fight against oppression and tyranny. And when the time came, ready to give their lives and give their shahidiyan. The news of this uprising spread across the land. And when Nabahu Singh beheaded Jaspat Rai, the Singhs had kept the decapitated head, and they played with it and kicked it around, and then they put it in a sack. The Mughal forces, as they fled the battle, were however able to drag away the headless corpse of Jaspat Rai. And as this was brought to Lahore, the family of Jaspat Rai gathered to perform the cremation and funeral rites, but they were unable to do so fully as the head was missing. Pandit Jagat Bhagat Gosain, the spiritual head of the family of Jaspat Rai, made his way to Lahore to perform the funeral rites, but on seeing the headless corpse, he was overcome with grief. And as he was the family Pandit, he travelled to Ahmedabad and begged the Singhs for the head of Jaspat Rai back, so he can take it and cremate the body and head together. He even gave a donation of 500 rupees to the Khalsa when they threw him the head. When the news of his brother's murder reached Lakhpat Rai, he became infuriated and he was beside himself in rage and anger. In a fit of emotion, he approached Yahya Khan, the governor of Lahore, and he removed his own turban and put it on the feet of Yahya Khan. And then Lakhpat Rai said, and he vowed he would not put this turban back on his own head, not until he had devastated the entire Sikh Panth, until every single Sikh had been slain. He swore an oath that he would destroy the Sikh Panth. He promised the very name of the Guru would disappear. He proclaimed the Sikh Qaum will be wiped out of the history books and no one shall even know that such a people existed. He declared that he would not refer to himself as a Kshatriya warrior until the Sikh are no more in existence. Yahya Khan was pleased with the Lakhpat Rai rage and told him, "Do not worry about money or forces, ammunition, weapons or cavalry. I shall fully fund this extermination of the Sikh populace. I will give you everything you need, all the support you need. Just get this bloody genocide underway immediately. Let the rivers of blood flow. Let the ground soak in the blood of the Sikh Panth. This Panth of Guru Nanak shall become extinct. Not a Sikh nor a shrine of theirs shall remain," announced Lakhpat Rai in great ego. Lakhpat Rai was also promoted to chief commander. All the Mughal forces and armies were now under his command for the duration of this genocide and mass murder killing spree. And the Lakhpat Rai immediately decided to intensify the already vile and extreme mission of annihilating the Khalsa, getting ready and setting off, mounting an attack. Lakhpat Rai planned on killing every single Singh warrior in Punjab and killing every single Sikh man, woman and child. No one was to be spared. And then once every Sikh in Punjab was dead, he vowed to travel out of Punjab and search and kill any remaining Sikh in areas outside of Punjab in foreign lands. Any Sikh residing there would also be killed. Anyone with the name Singh or who called themselves a Sikh, their whole village would be burnt to the ground. He vowed to turn every single Guru Ghar to rubble and to destroy all Sarups of Guru Granth Sahib Ji. They were to be thrown in wells or burnt. And just like that, it began. Lakhpat Rai started killing the Sikh of Lahore first. There were a number of Sikh in and around the Lahore area, some who had government positions and posts, some who were simply residing in and around the city with their families. They were all gathered together and arrested to be slaughtered. No one was spared, not even an infant child or babies, not women nor the elderly. Such was the cruelty and oppression at the time that even pregnant Sikh women were beaten and stabbed in the stomach with sharp daggers. And these were just poor Sikh householders and were just trying to live and get by, to survive, to make ends meet. Innocents living in poverty. They had nothing to do with anything. Simple people whose only crime was being sick and having faith in the true Guru. They were all gathered and arrested, being beaten and humiliated. The Granthi Singh of Gurdwara Dera Sahib, the Asthan where Guru Arjan Dev Ji was shaheed, Bhai Rattan Singh, his wife and his 1-year-old baby were murdered. They were murdered in cold blood in the Gurdwara Sahib, and each of them was hacked to pieces because they were doing seva of the Asthan. Even the 1-year-old child was not spared. That baby was also hacked apart. Many Sikh were being captured and tormented, tortured, then killed. They were having their gears forcefully cut, and they were being paraded through the streets of Lahore before being put to death, being killed out in the open for all to witness. All the Sikh in and around Lahore, along with their families, were rounded up and arrested, gathered to be killed on the day of Masya, which was the 10th of March 1746. Together, there were around 7,000 Sikh who were gathered and arrested, who were to be killed and slaughtered in one day. 7,000. The news of this spread throughout Lahore. The good people, those who had a conscience, were outraged. Many Hindu nobles and people of Lahore gathered to protest this mass genocide now taking place in Lahore. Diwan Lachi Mal and Diwan Kaura Mal, both high-ranking governors who had much love and respect for the Panth. Diwan Kaura Mal was often referred to by the Khalsa Singhs as Diwan Mittha Mal, Mittha meaning sweet, due to the relations and love which he had with the Singhs and the Khalsa Panth. Diwan Lachi Mal, Diwan Kaura Mal, Kashmiri Mal, Kanjali Mal, Lachi Ram, Diwan Surat Singh, Ram Mal, Behu Mal, Hari Ram and Desh Raj Ji, all high-ranking governors and some of Lahore's most influential people gathered together to protest these senseless killings. Many citizens of Lahore who were against this genocide and holocaust of the Sikh also gathered. They tried to convince Lakhpat Rai that these Sikh had no role in the killing of his brother. They were innocent and thus should not be killed. They said to him, "Your issue is with the Khalsa Singhs, the Nihangs. Fight them, but leave these innocents alone." Some Muslim faqirs and saints even gathered to protest this zulm, calling out to Lakhpat Rai and the governor Yahya Khan, saying this is not right. This is not in line with Islam. This is not the path of Allah. Do not shed the blood of the innocent. Why are you killing babies? Why are you killing women? This is just plain wrong. But the Lakhpat Rai did not care for their request. He had the whole military force behind him and he was hell-bent on continuing this bloodbath, this genocide. Lakhpat Rai ignored the objections of the Pandits and even the objections of Pandit Jagat Bhagat Gosai, his family's most respected elder and spiritual guide. He told them all in great arrogance, snapping at them, "Who are you? Even if God himself had came down to stop me, I would not stop. I am going to kill every single Sikh. Not one will I take pity on. Not one will I let remain." All the protesters and objectors were hurt by these sentiments. They were saddened by the current state of affairs, the killings, the genocide, the ethnic cleansing that was taking place. Some of the Diwans said to Lakhpat Rai, "Listen, the reason your brother died was because of you. Because of you, nobody else. You had a part to play in the killing of the great sant, the great saint Bhai Mani Singh Ji, whom everyone, Sikh, Hindu and Musliman, all revered. Doing this, you and your brother signed your own death warrants. Your brother's hands were also covered in blood of the innocent. He had ordered the killings of many poor villagers and Kisans. And the Khalsa Singhs, they have never killed anyone for no reason. They have never harassed or hurt the innocent. They have only ever acted out of defense. and fighting back. They have only ever killed those who would wish to do them harm, or who harm the poor and the needy. They are people of honour. Your brother chose to enrage this coiled cobra, which is the Khalsa, through the words that he spoke. If he did not utter those disrespectful words about the great Bhai Mani Singh, he would still be alive today. The death of your brother lies with you and your actions. You caused it, you. And now you are cursed to suffer the same. Saying this, they left. Some of the protesters and divans stayed behind to continue their protest, trying to convince Lakhpat Rai to change their minds. In desperation, they requested at least for him to stop or delay the planned genocide, to not kill the 7,000 Sikh men, women and children he had captured in Lahore. They requested Lakhpat Rai to at least hold off the killings and don't do it now, on the auspicious day of Masya, the last day of the lunar month, which was seen as a holy day across the subcontinent. Masya was considered auspicious and a great day for performing religious rituals and offering prayers and performing charitable deeds. But Lakhpat Rai refused to listen. He did not listen to the protesters, the governors or the divans. He ordered them all to leave immediately unless they wish to join the captured Sikh men, women and children and also be killed on this day. Lakhpat Rai then sent out messengers to call out, shouting in the streets, beating the toll to gather attention, advertising the mass killing and genocide about to take place, encouraging people to come out of their houses and join in to watch the carnage and butchering of the Sikh. Watch as the floor of Naqqa Square, Lahore, turns red into a sea of blood. And Lakhpat Rai, on that very day of March 10th, 1746, got all of these Sikh and their families killed. An eerie silence filled the whole city of Lahore. 7,000 Sikh men, women and children were massacred in one day. No one was spared. Young infants and babies were killed alongside their parents. Elderly grandmothers and pregnant women and young girls were also killed and murdered. A giant pool of blood was formed in that very Naqqa Square of Lahore. No one could even look at this sight. Piles of dead bodies stacked, laying motionless. Flies buzzed, and thousands of scavenger birds, such as vultures and crows, descended down, screeching as they ate the flesh of the dead bodies of our shaheeds. And after this killing, Lakhpat Rai stood on a stage and yelled out in arrogance. He shouted that from this day forth, no one shall say the name of the Guru. Doing so will incur the death penalty. After having your tongue cut out of your mouth, he publicly announced that the stomach of the person who utters the word Guru would be pierced with spears and sharp daggers. No one shall ever utter the word or the Shabad Guru. Even saying the Punjabi language word sugar, gur, which sounded like Guru, would be the cause of the death penalty. As a result, even to this day in Lahore, many refer to gur as Rori instead. Lakhpat Rai continued his crazy, bloodthirsty speech, and he ordered that no one will read the Bani of Baba Nanak. Anyone caught reading the Bani of the Guru shall be killed. He ordered that any and all Sarups of Guru Granth Sahib and any Gurbani Pothiyan and Gutke Sahib be burnt or thrown into wells and rivers. He ordered that everyone must cut their hair, even non-Sikhs, even non-Sikh, everyone must cut their hair. No one was permitted to keep long gaze or a beard. He got the holy tank of Sidi Darbar Sahib filled with dirt and manure. And after that massacre of the Sikh on March 10th, 1746, he ordered his officials to find and arrest 1,000 Sikh daily, whom were to be mercilessly killed in Lahore by executioners each and every evening. And the vile and demonic Lakhpat Rai, himself, would watch these killings of the Sikh every single day. In addition to this ongoing genocide and extermination mission against the Khalsa, Lakhpat Rai prescribed quotas for heads of villages, sarpanches, for the killing of Sikh. Under these orders, thousands of Sikh were mercilessly butchered and murdered every single day. To extinguish the Khalsa, Lakhpat Rai collected his forces from neighbouring garrisons. Many commanders and hill chiefs were called upon to aid in this genocide and ethnic cleansing. Sikh parents, because of the fear of the onslaught, sent their young children and sons off into the jungles and marshlands. The men were already there, and thus only women and old people stayed back, hiding in villages. When Lakhpat Rai found out that all the Naujawan Sikh Singhs are being sent to jungles, he was worried that these young boys would now join the Nihang Singh Khalsa and fight back against him using guerrilla warfare, Dhai Phat. So he cunningly announced publicly that no action will be taken against Sikh families who call their young sons back. Anyone who comes back out of the jungles will not be touched. But when approached by their parents, by their mothers, the young children and sons in the jungles said that Lakhpat Rai was just using this as a pretense and a trick to capture them and have them beheaded and killed, which he was, and this did happen. The parents now, the mothers and grandmothers, out of fear of Lakhpat Rai, also joined the Khalsa in the jungles, because they knew the Mughal forces would imprison them if they go back to their villages without their sons. So they also started living in the jungles and marshy lands and forests with the Khalsa Nihang Singh warriors. And thus, the population of Sikh living in jungles, forests and marshlands began to rise. The jati of Sikh living in the jungle areas vastly increased, and it's estimated that at least 15,000 Sikh lived in the jungles near the river Ravi alone. Lakhpat Rai, in retaliation, gathered a huge army together, tens of thousands of warriors per battalion, heavily armed troops and cavalry with many cannons, guns and ammunition set off towards the jungles and marshlands where the Khalsa were residing at this time. His diabolical plan was to attack and kill them all at once, to exterminate the whole Panth once and for all. The Singhs and the Khalsa Vahir who were living here in these harsh times were tried and tested. They had full faith and firm resolve in the true Guru, and to them Sikhi was everything. Nothing and no one could deter them from the Guru's path. And it's in this, the hardest of times, when the true mettle of a person is tested. And these Khalsa remained firm in their faith to the Satguru. Residing in the jungles, they were ready to fight and to die. And the Singhs in the jungles, when they found out about the mass genocide of innocent Sikh men, women, children and babies which occurred in Lahore, and they had become now aware also of the oncoming bloodthirsty maniac Lakhpat Rai's forces and the Mughal Empire who were hell-bent on killing them. The Khalsa Vahir in the forest and jungle marshlands at this time were under the command of Guru Sikhs such as Baba Deep Singh, Nawab Kapoor Singh, Jaspat Singh Ji Ahluwalia and Bhai Sukha Singh Ji. Baba Deep Singh Ji was roughly 65 years old at this time. Nawab Kapoor Singh was around 50, Jaspat Singh was around 28 and Bhai Sukha Singh was even younger than him. And in the jungle at one place the Singhs gathered to hold a Gormata, an emergency meeting of how to deal with this current dire situation. Heavily outnumbered and outgunned with a lack of resources, the Singhs discussed their options and tactics. Some of the most Jangi Larakke, war-ready Singhs whom lived as if already dead, with their heads on the palm of their hands, resolved to go straight to war with the Mughal forces of Lakhpat Rai. to wage a pitched battle and fight today, to go out in the open and give everything, to fight and to die, to show the evil Lakhpat Rai what time it was, to show the world the spirit of the Khalsa, to go out with a bang, to go out fighting, for all of them to step up and give their shahidiyah. Death to them was nothing but a change of clothes. They were eager to become shaheed, fighting in battle. And if any amongst them had become successful and gained shahidi, they would say he has done charai, he ascended and has now passed on to the next level. But now in this Gurmata, the wise elder Singhs, whom were battle-hardened veterans, warrior Khalsa leaders, wise and knowledgeable in the art of war, violence, battle tactics, strategy and survival, then came forward and spoke. They explained, the best option now is to continue waging a guerrilla warfare against these tyrant oppressors. Fighting a pitched battle out in the open against such numbers was not our best option. We will leave ourselves open to getting flanked, and we will be open to their cannons and gunfire. While we are not afraid of death, we will not be reckless and throw away our lives either. Our aim is to destroy the tyrant enemy and keep the Khalsa Panth alive. We are fighting for survival. We are fighting for the Panth. The enemy forces outnumber us in great numbers, and they will shoot us from a distance and kill us. We must use now our Khalsa battle tactics and guerrilla warfare of Dhai Phat, 2.5 strikes. In this form of combat, you never fight the enemy when he decides to fight you. You never fight where they want to fight you. You never fight the way they want to fight you. You choose your own time and place. You pick out the enemy's weakest vital points, the marma, and attack him here, seeking to do maximum damage. And if the enemy starts getting the upper hand, you disengage and you re-engage at your own will when the moment is right. And only when there is no way of disengaging from the enemy, then you fight to the death rather than surrender. Death on the battlefield was the ultimate glory for the Khalsa, one that must be earned. But this was considered only a last resort. The aim was to fight and live so they could fight again. Dharam Jud, killing many. The aim was to fight and kill, thus preserve the Khalsa Panth. And the Khalsa warriors were warriors who never gave up, ever. They always fought to the last breath. They always fought to the last drop of blood. And Qazi Nur Muhammad in 1764 wrote in his book Jangnama about this strategy of the Singh warriors. Referring to his Baluchistani brothers, he writes, "O my Baluch brothers, heed my words. Sometimes fighting, the Singhs, whilst engaged in battle, suddenly flee from the fight. Beware. Do not consider they run because they are defeated, but this is a war strategy of theirs. Sometimes being duped by them, some warriors of ours, thinking they have won, give chase after them. When the Singhs know they have sufficiently separated the pursuers from the main force and no one can come and help them from the main force, they suddenly regroup all at once and turn back and attack the pursuers, employing their swords in such a deadly manner that the pursuers cannot stand before them." He was warning the Mughals of the Khalsa tactics. And in this Gurmata now, all the Singhs listened to the advice of the elder senior Jagaare Singhs, and they agreed that this was the best course of action at this time. All the Jathe and Dals came together, Buddha Dal and Tarna Dal joined together to take action. They all gathered at Kanuwal Kishamb, the jungle marshlands and the edge of the river Ravi. And under this Dhai Phat strategy, the Singhs hiding in jungles attacked evil Lakhpat Rai's approaching forces. The Khalsa Singhs strike first and strike hard, avenging the many deaths and genocidal murders of Sikh men, women and children which took place earlier in Lahore. Striking at the heart of the enemy forces of Lakhpat Rai, the Khalsa Singhs sent the message that they are not afraid and they will not be killed hiding and lying down, but they will strike back like a deadly poised cobra. The Singhs attacked them viciously and violently, hacking and chopping through forces and then quickly retreating back into the dense, thick jungle forests. And as they took off, they took with them many enemy horses, snatching whatever arms and ammunition they could get hold of. This quick flash attack caused heavy losses to Lakhpat Rai's forces who were approaching the jungles. Lakhpat Rai and his generals were wonderstruck. Before they even knew what happened, the Singhs were gone like ghosts, leaving behind a mass of dead bodies. Lakhpat Rai, in a fit of rage, called together all his forces and commanders. Considering his losses in this first encounter, he chalked out a new strategy where mounted troops, equipped with guns and cannons, were to make up the main crucial component of his attack. He gathered many cannons and large guns, horse and camel mounted, and they would be used to shoot the Singhs as they attacked, riding in on their horses or as they made their escape. These would be used to fire into the thick, dense jungle forests, which the Singhs took refuge and called home. Lakhpat Rai had many gunmen in his forces, armed with long-barreled guns which would enable them to shoot and fire from great distances, covering much range and sniping Singhs dead. His infantry, the foot soldiers, would only enter the battle and the fight after the cannons and long-range guns had done much damage first. And he himself kept a heavily armed battalion of soldier bodyguards with him at all times. The coward stayed back in fear of his own life. He was scared to get close to the Singhs' location, and the Singhs, hiding in the Ganawal jungles, thick and rough terrain, were inaccessible to all. The enemy forces were unable to enter this area due to the thick jungle overgrowth. The Singhs were used to this rough area and rough living and could navigate through it, but the cavalry of the Mughals could not. The most inhospitable places the Singhs were used to calling home. They knew the jungles well. Each of them had knowledge of shortcuts, the best entrances and hideouts. And whenever the Mughal forces of Lakhpat Rai got close to the jungles and would look into the forests, the Singhs jumped out and killed them, sometimes jumping out of trees onto enemy horses and taking them out, and at other times hiding low, covered in mud and camouflaged, appearing out of nowhere, then dragging enemy soldiers into the thick jungle bushes and hacking them apart. Like ghosts, they appeared and disappeared, causing much devastation to the Mughal forces. And like this, fighting from their jungle cover using Dhai Phat, Singhs avoided heavy bombardment of enemy fire and cannonballs. Lakhpat Rai, in response, called forth an army of Beldars, those whose job it was to clear through jungles and cut down bushes, brush and overgrowth with huge shears and machetes. In great number, these Beldars began cutting into the jungles, making entrances into the jungles so that other soldiers could go in. But as they did, the Singhs shot and killed them and dragged them deep into the jungles, never to be seen or heard of again. Sometimes a decapitated head or limbs were thrown back out of the bushes to send a message to the other soldiers. This infuriated the Mughal forces, and they began setting fire to the jungles and forest areas, shooting fire-tipped arrows and catapulting fire torches deep into the forest areas, causing great bushfires which began to burn and spread rapidly. As they did this, they continued to fire many cannonballs into these areas also, and it was already blazing. The Indian heat, the bushes burnt, and this only added to the torment that the Singhs and their families were under. Starving and outnumbered, with no access to supplies at this time, the circumstances were looking even more grim. Having not eaten in many weeks and in constant battle, the Singhs and their families were suffering greatly. The Singhs, who were in their thousands, had long run out of any rations, and when they did manage to hunt and kill before this, there was no cooking or preparation facilities, as lighting fires would give away their positions. The Singhs had to eat whatever they could raw. And when a fellow Singh died, the body was committed to the water for Jal because they couldn't light funeral pyres. Just trying to survive, so they could fight the enemies of the Khalsa Panth, the Singhs went on. The Khalsa were here at this time, trapped in this jungle. They moved to the areas closer to the river Ravi, away from the fires. And this area of the jungle was pure swamplands, and only the Singhs on horseback could make it through here easily. The swamp waters were deep, thick, and muddy, and they were infested with snakes and crocodiles. And in these areas, the Singhs could not sit or lie down. And many Singhs lived on horseback for every hour of the day. The Khalsa Vahir at other parts were now moving deeper into the jungles, away from the burning hot forest fires and volleys of cannonballs and gunfire. Deeper into the jungle marshes they went, and on the other side was the fast flowing rapids of the river Ravi. Now the Singhs had no option but to move deeper, looking for a moment and a place to gather and strategize their next move. But their only concern at this time was to get out of the death trap that this jungle had become for them. Low on ammunition, the Singhs only had with them handheld weapons now. And the Singhs' weapons they had been fighting with for much time. Low on ammunition, weapons damaged through the numerous conflicts and battles, and in the jungles there were no blacksmiths to fix their weapons, to straighten out blades, or to sharpen them. If the Singh spears had broken, they now carried with them just the wooden shafts and lathia, and would have to make do with whatever weapons they had at this time. With broken swords, no chainmail, and no armour, the bare-chested Singhs had been fighting the heavily armed forces. Their skin burned in their heat, passing through the thick jungle overgrowth. Thorns and nettles tore at the Singhs' bodies. Each warrior bared many battle scars. Always on the move, day and night they stayed awake. They had not slept for many days. No sleep, no food, no drinking water, no access to weaponry supplies, no medical supplies or bandages. Many of their Singhs and their horses died in the jungles, some due to injuries from battle, others due to no medical care and injuries or food. They died. The Khalsa horses that lived on were looking weak and exhausted. Their ribs and bones were visible, and some of those horses even died of starvation. The times were only getting harder for the Guru's warriors. Great pains our elders endured, such difficulties they went through to keep Sikhi alive. Giving up Sikhi was never an option for them. All the comforts and riches of the world were nothing to them and mattered not. The only thing that mattered was the Guru's Sikhi. Because of this, they would bear any difficulty and never give in, never bending the knee, never giving up their faith. They would forever keep up the spirit of Sikhi alive, and it's because of them that we have Sikhi today. And that's why we pay homage to these great warriors who came before us. In this way, the Khalsa Singhs were on the move, escaping the raging jungle fires and pursuing forces of Lakhpat Rai, evading the heavy cannon fire and showers of bullets and arrows. Even animals were sprinting away from the thick forest fires, rapidly burning through the brush and trees. The Khalsa were moving deep into the jungle, where elephant grass grew 15 to 20 feet tall, and which was so thick it was almost impossible to pass through. In this swampy area, there were some sandy mounds which were covered in thorny bushes, ripping apart the feet of the Singhs. The swampy area and the sandy mounds were intermixed, and if caught in this area, you would die if there was no one to pull you out. The jungle, under heavy bombardment of cannons, gunfire, huge fireballs were catapulted deep into the jungles. Pain and difficulties surrounded the Singhs on all sides. The raging forest fires and heavy gunfire. Included in the forces of Lakhpat Rai were the famed Mughal warriors and commander Mirza Himmat Beg, Syed Ali Khan, Nahar Khan, Karam Bakhsh, and the son of Jaspat Rai, Harpaj Rai. These vile, sadistic, genocidal murderers had set out with the sole purpose of massacring the Khalsa, making them into a thing of myth. However, Despite all the odds stacked against them, the spirit of the Singhs remained unbroken. Despite the odds, the spirit of the Khalsa can never be extinguished. They remained in Chardikala. Burning jungle on one side, raging waters of River Ravi on the other, and on the other were the mountainous, harsh terrains of Basoli. The Singhs thought at this point they could escape through the River Ravi. They stood on the river bank watching the water flow fiercely. The rapid-like waters were smashing against boulders on the banks of the river and breaking them. The strong current was uprooting trees and carrying them downstream. Two Singhs, both experienced swimmers, and Jungi Forge, the brothers of Bhai Rattan Singh, who later went on to form the Dhaliwal missile, went first to test the raging waters of this river, and both of these brothers dived in, and they were swept away by the strong current, drowning as they tried to swim to the other side. The Singhs then reflected that this route was not viable, and they decided against anyone else going into the river. In desperation to survive, starving and bloodied, injured and in great pains, the Singhs then headed towards the mountains. And history dictates it was a Jatha of around 4,000 Singhs that headed towards and into the Basoli mountains, thinking that this was their escape and that they would take refuge in this mountainous area until they have recovered from the current state and situation. And in the most desperate of times, seeking to escape this harsh difficulty behind them, the Jatha of Singhs failed to realise the mountains were occupied by the Bahari Hill Raja forces. And as they rode up and climbed these mountains, they were greeted with bullets and arrows from the greedy and honourless hill chiefs. Many Singhs were made shaheed here. Singhs, along with their horses, were pushed off the steep mountains as they attempted to climb up. Singhs and horses fell to their deaths, and many others were shot, wounded, and eventually killed. The Bahari hill chiefs showed no mercy on the Singhs, and the Singhs suffered at their hands, fighting an uphill battle against these hill chiefs. The path up the mountains was treacherous, with the Singhs using their spears to dig footholes for their horses as they climbed themselves, all doing this while evading gunfire and fighting up against the Bahari hill chiefs. Many Singhs and horses fell into the River Ravi as they were climbing the mountain paths, never to be seen again. The Singhs in the mountains split apart as they climbed, and some were caught in smaller groups and forced to fight larger forces of hill chiefs who had been waiting in the mountains to ambush and attack the Khalsa. The Singhs at the bottom were thinking the Singhs at the top were doing okay and had gotten out of the tough situation in the jungle, and the Singhs at the top were thinking the Singhs at the bottom were okay as they were not being ambushed as they were being. The truth was, everywhere, all of the Singhs were in danger and facing extreme difficulties, and they were being set upon by the various enemy forces present. Many in this Jatha of 4,000 Singhs who entered the mountains were shaheed. And Bhai Rattan Singh Ji Pangu, who wrote this history in Panth Prakash, tells how he is only able to give a very brief outline of what happened in the CHHOTA GHALLUGHARA. He mentions how he failed to do justice in telling the story of this genocide, and how he was only able to relay the hardships of some of the Singhs and the Panth that they went through at this time. He states in his writings he was unable to go in all of the innumerous difficult pains and struggles the Panth went through, but he reiterates that this was one of the most wretched, awful, horrid and difficult times the Khalsa Panth went through. Many Sikh men, women and children were butchered and murdered in Lahore and made shaheed. Many were pulled out of their houses, rounded up and killed, mass murdered daily by Lakhpat Rai's forces. Many were hunted down in jungles and made shaheed. Many were shaheed, burning to death in the raging jungle and forest fires. Many were shaheed under the barrage of cannons and gunfire, being shot and blasted apart. Many were shaheed fighting hand to hand. Many were shaheed in the rivers of the waters, Ravi rivers, and many were shaheed in the mountains, many died of starvation, and many died of illness in the jungle forests. The CHHOTA GHALLUGHARA was such a painful episode in Sikh history, and not to remember this episode of Sikh history and not to remember these brave shaheed Singhs and Singha as a black mark against our name. We should listen to these Sakya and tell them to our children and our families. For these sacrifices kept Sikhi alive for us to have today. And in the midst of death and doom, fire rapidly burning in the jungle forest behind them, cannon and bullet fire, the powerful river Ravi, the death trap in the mountains with the Pahari forces, the Panth was under attack from every single direction. And then Bhai Sukha Singh Ji calls out to the Singhs, roaring out, "Singhal, I am going to war directly with Lakhpat Rai now and his forces. I am going to search for him and fight him in the thick of this battle. Those Singhs who are eager to fight in this battle and slay the Mughals, come with me." Bhai Sukha Singh then called out to the enemy forces who were close by, asking them, "Where is Lakhu Papi? Let's fight, let's do this. Go and tell him, I am coming, death is here." Lakhpat Rai lived in fear like the coward that he was, always scared to enter the battle, always switching between his small war elephant and his faster moving horses, always surrounded by infantry on foot and flanked by heavy cavalry. In front he had numerous camels and other war cannons mounted on them, scared to fight man to man. But the brave Sukha Singh didn't care about any of this. He rode his horse directly into the direction of where Lakhpat Rai was and the midst of this huge army forces. Seeing the determined, hungry tiger chopping and hacking through his forces, decimating his warriors, Lakhpat Rai got scared and he ordered his forces to all file at once on the venerable Sukha Singh as he charged through his army. Many cannons and guns fired in the direction of that panther warrior tiger Sukha Singh, and Sukha Singh was hit with a barrage of bullets, and he was hit with a small cannonball in the leg. The cannonball was made of solid iron and must have weighed 4 or 5 kg, and it was fired from one of the camels. As it hit by Sukha Singh's thigh, it broke his leg, ripping through much of the flesh and shattering his bone. The left leg of Sukha Singh was rendered useless, causing him to halt his attack and causing him to abandon the attack on Lakhpat Rai. Sukha Singh now was in dire needs, bleeding profusely from his leg. He cut off some of his kamarkasa waistcloth, and then while still on horseback galloping through Mughal forces, he tied his leg. Where it was shot, he tied above this like a tourniquet to stop the bleeding. And Sukha Singh then also, while still galloping, tied his leg to the saddle of the horse, forced to abandon his attack and retreat. But even then, while retreating, he would turn back at times and engage the enemy and look to see if he could spot Lakhpat Rai anywhere in the field of battle. Such was the warrior spirit of this Khalsa. He and his band of warrior Singhs still continued to fight the enemy, and he fought like an agile leopard in the battlefield. He fought and killed many enemy, and he called out to the Singhs, giving them encouragement and haunsla, telling them not to worry, as they will still get their hands on Lakhu Papi. Other Singhs seeing him fight, gravely wounded and injured, but still seeing him fight fearlessly in the battle, were invigorated, and they fought harder than before, slicing and hacking, chopping the enemy to bits. The Singhs could see they were heavily outnumbered and outgunned, but they stayed on the battlefield. And those who stayed on the battlefield were killed there. Others decided to make their escape. Using the Khalsa strategy of Dhai Phat, now was the time for the Khalsa to leave the battle. The aim was to gather strength and come back and fight again another day. The aim was to keep the Panth alive and Sikhi alive, and to kill and decimate the enemy. It was ordered for all their Singhs to make their own escapes, head south towards Malwa area, and we would regroup there. Bhai Sukha Singh ordered all of the Singhs to split up. Singhs without horses and Singhs with horses were split up. The Singhs without horses were directed to climb the mountains to escape. They were to regroup and make their way to the rest of the Fauja later on, once they were rested and back to health and capable of travelling the distance south to meet the rest of the Singhs when things had calmed down. Those Singhs on foot then climbed the mountains, but this time the Singhs on horseback gathered at the foot of the mountains and provided cover fire with what ammo and arrows they had left, exhausting their whole resource at this time to every last bullet and arrow to aid the escape and safe climbing of their brothers whom were without horses. The Singhs shot and killed many of the hill chief forces, causing many of them to retreat and run from their positions in which they were camped. The Singhs on horseback stayed until the Singhs climbing had reached safety and made their way into the mountains. As the Singhs made their exit, many losses took place. Brothers, fathers and sons were split up from each other in this chaos. The Singhs who had horses could not and would not abandon their horses ever, as to leave a horse behind in the field of battle was a great sin, and horses in the Panth, even till today, are known as Jaan Bhai, life brothers of the Singhs, whom they have a special bond with. They would ride or die together, and that's the true definition of a ride or die. Even the Singhs left there. As the Singhs were left there was some discussion between them on what route to take, but Sukha Singh roared out that our dharma is to fight, and without fighting and engaging in warfare we achieve nothing. Worry not for your lives, worry only for the Panth, and let's make haste and charge the enemy. Then Bhai Sukha Singh led the Singhs out, led from the front, through the most direct route, which was straight through the enemy forces, to fight through the army of the Mughal forces, riding in formation with Sukha Singh as the tip of the spear. Tearing through the heart of the enemy, the Singhs made their escape. And as Sukha Singh led the Fauja through the Mughal forces, he told the Singhs to keep an eye out for Lakhu, as if he spotted him, he would take off his head in this battle. When the Singhs charged the forces of Lakhpat Rai, they started to move out of the way. The Singhs were roaring Jagaare, and much of Lakhpat Rai's forces became scared and intimidated. They fled and moved to the side, giving the Singhs an easier way through their army. Those who stood their ground, those who showed courage, were killed by the Khalsa. The Singhs then rode through the enemy forces and rode away. The forces of Lakhpat Rai tried to fire upon them as they did, and the Singhs who were straggling behind were shot and killed. Sukha Singh even turned back to help the straggling Singhs, but was unable to save all of them, but he did save many of them. Bear in mind that Sukha Singh had been heavily injured and his leg was broken. He had lost much blood at this point, but he still fought courageously. The elder warrior Singhs like Nawab Kapoor Singh were proud of their younger brother's bravery, and it's estimated that 10 to 12,000 Singhs were made shaheed in this whole battle alone. The Akali Nihang Singh Khalsa killed all of the Mughal commanders who presented themselves on the battlefield. Mirza Himmat Beg, Syed Ali Khan, Nahar Khan, Karam Baksh and the son of Jaspat Rai, Harpaj Rai, was killed in this battle by the Khalsa. Lakhpat Rai survived as he did not enter the battlefield. He stayed back like the coward he was. Once the Singhs had escaped and rolled away out of danger, they took a moment to regroup. It was this point that the Singhs drank water. For many of them it was the first time in many days. After the fighting, many battles and skirmishes, they took a brief moment to take care of their horses, opening their saddles and giving the horses a chance to relax and drink some water. After this short rest, the Singhs moved on. There were some Singhs in this Jatha now whose horses were shaheed while they were making their escape and fighting, so now they were on foot. And as they walked on the burning hot sand, on the banks of the rivers and through the jungle areas, their feet were getting damaged, ripped up and burnt. They had to tear whatever cloth they had and tied it on their feet so they could carry on moving. They had many miles to walk on this burning sand, and the cloth rags they tied to their feet offered little or no protection. With great difficulties, they continued on their journey and moved forward, crossing the river Beas and then the river Satluj. Passing through jungles, they reached the area of the village Jeto. The Singhs then stopped here and camped in this area, as well as other local areas. Here they would camp and finally take rest. Bhai Sukha Singh also arrived here, and he got off his horse, having travelled roughly 400 kilometres with his broken leg tied to the saddle of his horse. Before that, even fighting in the thick of battle, where he chopped down and killed many enemy forces. Getting off his horse, he was put on a manja and received urgent medical attention. The best and most senior doctors in the region were called upon to help. They extracted the bullets and shrapnel from his body and nursed his leg, cleaning the wound, applying ointment, oil and other ointments, tying his leg up and putting it in a pipe to keep it straight and raised. It took 6 months to nurse his leg back to health, and Bhai Sukha Singh spent this time on a manja, being looked after by the other Singhs in the jungle areas of this bend. Bhai Sukha Singh Ji passed this time reading and reciting much Gurbani, as well as instructing many of the other Singhs in Shastra Vidya and passing on his knowledge of Khalsa battle tactics and strategies. Many of the other injured Singhs were also nursed back to health at this time. Some of them were shaheed. The fellow Singhs and villagers in this area all helped each other out and served the Khalsa Panth and served each other during this time. The Singhs repaired and sharpened their Shastra, their weapons, getting themselves ready once again for Dharamjud, righteous warfare. After 6 months, Sukha Singh was able to walk again, and getting ready, he donned all of his Shastra and mounted his horse after many months for the first time and went for a ride. And as he did, he was just as jungy and agile as before. He was the same Sakh warrior with the exact spirit. Bhai Rattan Singh Ji Pangu, who wrote this whole episode down, narrates that he is writing it down as was told it by his own father, as he heard it firsthand. His father, Rai Singh, himself was present throughout this whole ordeal and stayed by Sukha Singh's side throughout this whole battle and ordeal, and through that 6 months stayed with Bhai Sukha Singh Ji. Bhai Rattan Singh Ji in Panth Prakash now goes on to tell what happened to those other Singhs whom were without horses in the GHALLUGHARA and escaped up the mountains, climbing up high into that mountainous area. Many Singhs who entered into this terrain were set upon by the Hindu hill chiefs and their forces. The Singhs in this area then split up into smaller groups, or some were even alone. And in these small groups and alone, they fought back like mountain lions against the treacherous foes. Some of the Singhs went higher up into the highest peaks, and in this mountainous area the Singhs struggled to find food, the hill chiefs still after them. The Singhs were unable to go into the guarded mountain villages, and many of them slowly died of starvation in the mountains. They were trying to survive in this rough terrain in a hostile environment. There was a great scarcity of food and supplies in these areas, and Singhs survived on whatever they could hunt and kill in this mountainous area. Many Singhs gathered together in the mountains and decided that sticking together was their best choice for survival. And they raided villages of the hill chiefs and fought against them in these areas, taking whatever provisions, food and clothes they needed. In some mountainous areas, the villagers were sympathetic to the Singhs, as they knew the Singhs were of honour, and the Singhs were keeping them safe against the Mughals and fighting against them, and they provided the Singhs with some shelter. They knew it was the Singhs that saved innocent Hindu girls from the Mughal Pathans, whom the Mughal Pathans would often kidnap. And in these areas, the villagers provided the Singhs with a few crops so they could cook their own meals, and the Singhs in return would leave these village areas alone. Other older villages were against the Singhs and would recall the times the Singhs looted them as they passed, and in the past, and they recalled the times Banda Singh Bahadur passed through and devastated this area and brought the hill chiefs to their knees. Banda Singh Bahadur did this to act revenge upon the treacherous, evil deeds of the hill chiefs who fought against the Khalsa in the past. Some Singhs now in this area went around in disguise, passing a few months in this way, and in the cold winter months they came down. as to spend winter in these mountains would be extremely difficult. The mountain Singhs eventually met each other and made their way down. The Khalsa once again started to unite after many months. At Kiratpur Sahib, Jathiyar Singhs gathered together and sent letters across to Punjab to find out where the rest of the Singhs were and find out whom had survived and whom had become shaheed. Here, the Singhs heard about the further actions of Lakhpat Rai, as his forces went through the jungles and battlegrounds, finding any dead bodies of Singhs whom were shaheed on the battleground, chopping off their heads and decorating the city of Lahore with the decapitated heads of the Khalsa warriors. Bhai Rattan Singh Ji estimates that over 40,000 Singhs and Sikh were shaheed during the CHHOTA Ghallughara. However, these were no definite numbers, but many believe the numbers to be much greater. Another Jatha of Singhs camped at Barnala. Here there was a large dera which had lots of land. It belonged to Maharaja Allah Singh, and here around 2,000 to 3,000 Singhs camped in the Maharaja's lands. Maharaja Allah Singh himself had taken Amrit from Buddha Dal from the hands of Nawab Kapoor Singh. He served all of the Singhs here with great love and affection. He gifted each and every Singh with a beautiful shawl, which they could use as a blanket, and he gave each of the Singhs money. His wife Fateh Kaur also served the Singhs with great humility. She herself helped cook, chopping the vegetables and cooking the dal, and every day she would serve langar to the Singhs. One day, the dal which was cooked was very watery, and as she served the dal to one particular grumpy old Nihang Singh warrior, he looked at his batta, at this really watery dal, and questioned what was he supposed to do with such watery dal. And Maharani Fateh Kaur replied, "If you are not satisfied, why don't you just pour it on my head? Mere sar te pa de." The grumpy old Nihang warrior got up and actually poured the dal over the Maharani. The Maharani had hot dal poured over her, and she went crying to her husband, complaining to Maharaja Allah Singh that these people whom were being persecuted, we serve food to and cook for and do their seva, and one of them just poured hot dal over my head. Maharaja Allah Singh laughed. He turned to his wife and replied, "Consider yourself blessed. You are going to have boiling hot oil and acid poured over you, and our whole family was going to suffer the same fate. Every last one of us would have been killed and executed by the Mughals, but because of the actions of these Nihang warriors, this has been reduced to one batta or one bowl of dal. This is our blessing." Immediately Maharani understood their karam had been saved and reduced by these very Nihang warriors, and she continued to serve the Singhs with great humility, love and affection. The Jathiyav Singhs rested and slowly began to reunite. Back in Lahore, Lakhpat Rai and Shah Nawaz both became more and more egotistical. They claimed they had destroyed the Sikh Panth forever. They believed the Panth was now almost extinct. These idiots both went around boasting, drunk on their ego. They started to boast that they were the true kings of Lahore now, and Punjab was theirs, and now Delhi was theirs for the taking, and they would do whatever they liked. Lakhpat Rai had the blood of countless Sikh men, women and children on his hands, and he continued to commit great sins. Lakhpat Rai had many saroops of Guru Granth Sahib Ji thrown in wells and burnt. He made announcements that the work of Guru Nanak Dev Ji was now outlawed. Drunk on ego, he committed blasphemy against the great Guru, saying no one was to say the name of Nanak ever. And anyone who did beadbi of the Guru, we all know only death and doom searches them out. They will never be at peace, not in this life and not in the afterlife. They will only suffer, and suffer in the most humiliating and painful of ways. Meanwhile, in Kabul, the Pathan warlord Ahmad Shah Abdali had his eyes set on Lahore and Delhi and set off with the desire of taking it over. As his large forces, Ahmad Shah and his large forces approached Lahore, Lakhpat Rai and Shah Nawaz did not have the military forces to match them. They had exhausted nearly all of their resources going after the Khalsa and had suffered massive losses at the hands of Sukha Singh, Nawab Kapoor Singh and the rest of the Khalsa warriors. And now in this situation, they found themselves in a tight spot. So they folded and bowed before Ahmad Shah Abdali, surrendering Lahore to him, seeking to save their own lives and their own positions, and now working for Ahmad Shah Abdali's court. After a short while, Ahmad Shah Abdali continued on his plan and moved towards Delhi to capture Delhi. When those in Delhi heard about this, Qamar-ud-Din and Surya Ali, both ministers in Delhi and great armies, along with Raja Madho's forces from Jaipur, united together and started moving north to prevent the forces of Ahmad Shah Abdali getting to Delhi. The forces met close near Sirhind and a battle took place. Mir Mannu, the son of the Delhi minister Qamar-ud-Din, was present in this battle, and in this battle Qamar-ud-Din was hit by a cannonball and killed. The Mughal forces of Delhi eventually beat the Pathan forces of Ahmad Shah Abdali and forced them to retreat back to Kabul, vacating Lahore as they left. Mir Mannu, after the death of his father, took a leadership role and then took control of Lahore as he did. He had Lakhpat Rai arrested and thrown in jail. Lakhpat Rai was scolded for folding and bowing before the Pathan forces, and he was fined 3 million rupees. He was able to pay 2 million rupees, giving it everything he had. Everything in his treasury was given up to pay this amount. At this point, along came the Panth's Premi, the Khalsa Panth's trusted and beloved Gauramal. Gauramal had great love for the Sikh Panth and recited the Nitnem daily. The Panth referred to him as Mittha Mal because he had sweet love for the Panth. In fact, Bhai Sahib Dr. Veer Singh, the great Sikh historian and academic, is from the family lineage of Diwan Gauramal. And Diwan Gauramal approached and spoke to Mir Mannu at this time, negotiating a payment of 1 million rupees for Lakhpat Rai. Gauramal now had Lakhpat Rai in his possession, locked in a prison cell, and Gauramal told Lakhpat Rai, I told you not to murder the innocent Sikh, but you did not listen. You killed innocent Sikh men, women and children. You did not spare anyone. Now you must die. You committed Beadbi of Gurbani, burning Saroop and throwing Gurbani down wells. You have sealed your fate. Gauramal told Lakhpat Rai all of this. You committed a genocide on the Sikh Panth. You shall suffer for this. You outlawed the name of Guru Nanak. I tell you this, the name of Nanak shall spread throughout the whole world. Then Gauramal took Lakhpat Rai and had his hands tied behind his back, and he was beaten with old shoes in the face. He was then thrown in a deep pit, which would be used as a public toilet. Covering up the top of the hole, a toilet was created, and he called all Sikh to come forth and take turns in urinating and defecating on top of the Papi Lakhpat Rai. Many Sikh and Singhs came from far and wide to do so, and with great enthusiasm and eagerness, many people did from all across Lahore, emptying their bowels, defecating, shitting and pissing upon him. Lakhpat Rai died a much-deserved horrid death. He was not noble enough to die by the sword or the gun. He deserved worse, and his death was a reflection of his life. Lakhpat Rai in that hole tried to survive as long as he could. The little rat suffered. He cried and howled, screaming and crying. But after many weeks, he slowly suffered and died, drowning and suffocating in piss and shit. He died a much-deserved death. The sins he had committed in life were now the cause of his well-wanted death. The Khalsa, on the other hand, only grew stronger. But this was not the end of the struggles for the Akali Nihang warriors. The Khalsa would go on to face many more challenges, genocides and war. But till this day, the Panth of Guru Nanak, the Panth of Guru Gobind Singh still lives on. And it's very important we remember the CHHOTA GHALLUGHARA and the great difficulties that Khalsa went through and all the Shahidia the Panth gave. Please forgive any and all mistakes made during this seva of narrating this Sakhi. Bhul chuk maaf karna. And please share this sakya with your friends and family. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.